to ask questions about item 10.3, Maria.
Yep. Councillor Cameron.
So I guess these questions are for Councillor Lambur since he's moved the motion. I'm just wondering, Councillor Lambur, whether you were aware that there's an online survey regarding the Beeline that's to close on February 28th. It's still open.
And I would imagine that Councillor Lambur has an opportunity to respond to questions.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Usually the question process goes through staff in the instance of a staff report, but in this instance, since Councillor Lambur is the author of the notice of motion, he can respond to those questions. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Cameron, am I on here? Yes. Okay. Yes, I'm aware of that, and if you have a series of questions, I'd be happy to receive those and respond to them on March the 4th.
Well, I'd like to ask whether you, ultimately there's a, is it, I mean, I guess first I'm asking, are you aware that there's an online survey that has been publicized for now 3 weeks or more that it's to close on February 28th regarding the Beeline? I'm just asking if you're aware about that while you're making this motion.
Yes, I am.
Okay, and are you aware that there's a telephone, sorry?
Councillor Cameron, if you have a series of questions, could you please list them, and I will respond to them on March the 4th. I'm not going to respond to them now.
Well, I'm concerned, Councillor Lambert, that on March the 4th, it will be after the online survey and the telephone survey and such are conducted, and the issue is now is the timing of this motion vis-a-vis those consultation processes, so that's why I'm raising them now.
The proper place is to respond to those on March the 4th.
Sorry, just to clarify, I think the chair can determine the appropriateness of the questions with the help of the legislative clerk, but if Councillor Lambert, you don't wish to answer the question, that's your prerogative. Councillor Cameron?
I guess, okay, well, that's the first question. I'll ask if you're aware that there's an event scheduled on Wednesday by the Capilano University Students Union regarding the Beeline. Are you aware of that?
So order. I'll just ask the public to keep their comments to themselves while we're conducting our business. Thank you.
Do you have a series of questions that you wish to ask me, Councillor Cameron?
I'm
Are
asking.
you asking them one by one? I told you that I would give you an answer, and I will respond to those in my introductory remarks on March the 4th.
But what I think is...
And that's all I have to say.
Well, I think the people who are participating in the online survey, the telephone survey, who are still sending us email correspondence, who are holding events on this issue, deserve to know whether you will be considering their points of view, or whether you have, by putting forward this motion, signaled that you're not open to differing points of view.
Well, of course I would be open to hear their points of view. The notice of motion does not in any way exclude consideration of those points of view.
When you formulated your notice of motion, Councillor Lambert, did you have a report from staff regarding the results of previous consultation processes?
I am going to reiterate once more and for the final time, if you have a series of questions, would you please give them to me? This is turning into a little bit of a lawyerly interrogation. I'm not a lawyer. I do not appreciate your line of questioning.
These are simple,
that's it.
These are simple questions, and I think the public is entitled to answers to these questions. And I've had concerns expressed to me by the public that there appears to be a fait accompli, and they wonder whether they should be continuing to participate in the consultation process. So it's a simple question. Have you had any report from staff regarding summarizing the previous results of the consultation to date?
I've given you my answer. I've tried to accommodate you.
So
just keep going with your questions.
Now, what I'm asking is, did you come up with the wording for this motion?
Keep asking your questions.
So I'm asking whether you came up with the wording for this question, or did you
Can I
have this?
again ask the public to keep their comments down, or keep their comments themselves?
keep asking the questions. I'll answer
I'm asking whether
March
you came
4th.
up with the wording or whether you had assistance from staff at all in coming up with the wording for this resolution.
Keep asking the questions. Do you have further questions?
Well, I'd like that question answered. If you're not going to
told
answer it,
you.
that's fine.
How
But
many
I-
times do I have to tell you? I'll answer those
Can
on March
we,
the 4th.
Move forward in a respectful manner. If you don't wish to answer the question, Councillor Lambert, you can say, you
I've
don't
said
have,
that.
I don't want to answer.
I've said that a number of times now.
So I'd like to look for some clarification on the motion you put forward. What, did you inquire before you brought this notice of motion whether staff have already been talking with TransLink and Park Royal regarding alternative alignments or bus lay-by locations for a Beeline terminus at Park Royal Shopping Centre? Did you inquire about that before you made the notice of application or notice of motion? It's a-
Councillor Lambert, did you not wish to
have-
answer the question?
I have said, how many different ways can I say that I will answer those questions in my preamble, introductory remarks on March the 4th? I appreciate your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, but what you're asking for, Councillor Lambert, is a resolution to direct staff to work with TransLink, the owners of Park Royal Shopping Centre, the Squamish First Nation, to identify possible alternative alignments, bus lay-by locations for a Beeline terminus option at Park Royal Shopping Centre. And I'm asking you, in the context of understanding this application or notice of motion and whether it will actually achieve anything, whether you inquired first whether any of those discussions had already happened, and if so, what transpired during those discussions.
Again, I will answer those questions on March the 4th. Next question.
Am I to understand from your, is it the intent of your application to, notice of motion to rule out terminuses from the Beeline at anywhere else other than Park Royal? I'm asking, is that your intent? I'm trying to understand
Look,
the
okay.
notice of application.
Just simply, I asked you at the beginning of this series, just list your questions, and I'll provide a response to them
Can I
on March
ask,
the 4th. This is
can I-
not the point of
What,
debating.
one second,
yeah.
one second. Councillor, Mr. Panneton, perhaps the procedure bylaw does allow questions during this period. Perhaps you can explain why that rule is in place
Madam Mayor.
at the notice of motion stage.
Madam Mayor, the intent of the ability of council to ask questions before motion is put on the floor is so that council members may ask staff, or in this case, a council member, for any information that they believe is pertinent in order for them to make up their mind on the motion that will eventually be put on the floor.
And in advance of the actual debate of the motion.
In advance of or on the day of, as the case may be. Thank you.
So the challenge, Madam Mayor, is that we're to come March 4th ready to debate this notice of motion, but on its face, I'm not sure, and it's not clear to me what the notice of motion is asking. So that's why I'm asking Councillor Lambert if what the notice of motion seems to suggest is we should start studying a Park Royal terminus. But I'm wondering if he knows whether there has been such study. He's declined to answer that. And now I'm trying to make it clear whether the intent of Councillor Lambert's notice of motion is to rule out 21st, 24th, or any other Beeline terminus in favor of studying only and considering only the Park Royal terminus. That's a fairly simple question because the community seems to want clarity as to where the terminus is going to be. And if I'm going to speak knowledgeably and coherently on March 4th about that question, I would like to know whether it's going to be on the table in Councillor Lambert's motion or if we're just going to be voting on March 4th whether to study Park Royal and keep all the other terminuses on the table.
And there's going to be plenty of time on March 4th to debate this, and I'll be able to provide clarification to you at that time. That's the purpose of having this notice of motion discussed on the date specified, not today.
No, I'm not, Councillor Lambert, I'm not wanting to discuss the merits of your notice of motion. I'm wanting to simply understand what you're putting forward. And as drafted, it's not clear to me what you're putting forward. And the purpose of giving notice a week in advance is to give people time to understand what's on the table or not, so that they can come, including council members, but also members of the public, on March 4th, understanding what's going to be determined. I think the community wants to know, both those pro and against the Beeline proposal, whether council will be considering ruling out the 21st, 24th Street terminus or other terminuses other than Park Royal, or whether we are just going to be talking on March 4th about directing further study about Park Royal. That clarity is, I think, something that the community will seek, and is certainly something that I am seeking, and it's certainly something I feel that council's entitled to in advance of showing up on March the 4th. So can you please give me some clarity?
As I've said, I'll give you that clarification on March the 4th.
Mr. Panetton, can you also clarify the purpose of a notice of motion in advance of the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Notice of motion is required by the council procedure bylaw. The intent of giving notice of motion is so that council has an opportunity to be prepared to debate a motion that will be coming forward at a subsequent council meeting. It's essentially advance notice so that it's not sprung on council without warning at the meeting of. Thank you.
I mean, my personal view is we should resolve this issue for once and for all, and I'm not sure that Councillor Lambert's motion is going to do that if all it's asking for is further study. So that's why I'm asking this question. He's declined to answer about the terminus. So I'll go down to my next set of questions. On the notice of motion, there's some critical comments in the preamble about the bus priority lanes. I'm wondering, Councillor Lambert, if your intention in your notice of motion is for council to decide on March 4th whether to rule out bus priority lanes west of Park Royal. Is that the intent? Is that going to be a subject? Is that the intent of your notice of motion?
I will give you that clarification on March the 4th.
So again, Madam Mayor, I just will point out that it's going to be, this issue has been festering in this community for months, and I personally want to see it resolved, and what I'm hearing is evasion and a lack of specificity, and quite frankly, I think council deserves better, and I think the community deserves better. So I guess I'll ask, having made no progress here, I will ask one last piece of clarification. Councillor Lambert, is the intent of your notice of motion that we're going to be talking about on March the 4th to rule out parking loss in Ambleside as part of the Beeline proposal, or to limit the amount of parking that would be lost, street parking, as part of the proposal?
I'll provide clarification on March the 4th.
Councillor Lambert, do you need more time to answer these questions?
No, I think it's entirely appropriate to have the time to consider answering all of these questions together as a preamble to the debate on the notice of motion. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing, and being able to answer all of your questions at that time.
Well, Councillor Lambert, did you circulate the wording of this notice of motion to council to ask if we had any questions before you filed it and it was published?
I'll provide that clarification on March the 4th.
Councillor Lambert, I think that's just a yes/no answer.
Madam Mayor, listen, this is going nowhere.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not trying to be obstructionist, but this changes. I would like to see, and Mr. Panetton, perhaps you could provide some clarification. If council wanted to make actually a decisive decision, and ruling out aspects of the Beeline that are causing considerable friction in the community, is it your understanding we would have to bring either a significant amendment to this motion or some sort of new type of motion would have to be brought to before the March 4th meeting? Because I can't understand whether it's going to be determined on Councillor Lambert's notice of motion, and so I'm left with a complete lack of clarity. And what do I tell people in the community if they're coming to speak to it?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Cameron, speaking purely from a procedural perspective, on March 4th, Councillor Lambur will have an opportunity to introduce his notice of motion. It'll then be moved and seconded by the mover and seconder. Once the motion is on the floor, it's deemed to be in the possession of council. Council can vote to amend the motion. Council can pass or defeat the motion. Council could choose to refer the motion back to staff, or council could choose to defer consideration of that motion until a later date. I'm not aware if there's another process kind of beyond that
Okay,
in terms of a new motion or anything, but
I'll just finish with this then. If there is no other way to get an actually effective motion on the agenda for March 4th, I just want to give notice to Councillor Lambur that I will be proposing amendments to his motion to rule out the 24th and 21st terminuses, to rule out BAT lanes, to have council rule out bus priority lanes from west of 13th in Ambleside, and to direct staff that any proposal should minimize, if not eliminate, the reduction of on-street parking as part of any proposal. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Gambioli.
Okay, so my turn. I have a few questions as well about this motion. So a few weeks back, some of you may have been here, I can't recall, but for example, Councillor Thompson had a motion, a notice of motion that she brought, and between the time that it came and the time that we debated it, she went to staff, she talked to us, and it was revised, and everyone was consulted. So in this case, I would like to know whether the mover and or seconder made any effort to discuss this motion with any other members of council or the mayor or the CAO, which is the normal procedure.
Councillor Gambioli, I think the questions are supposed to be limited to the substance of the notice of motion and not about intent or the procedure of it arriving where it did.
I think that we can get Mr. Paniton to clarify. I think the scope of these questions is within the realm of whether the scope of these questions within the realm. If you can answer that question.
Madam Mayor, the council procedure bylaw generally speaks to asking questions pertinent to the item. Otherwise, that's about all it has to say
So
on
it's
the matter.
pretty general. So thank you. I'll take that as a no, because I kind of do know the answer to that question. There was no consultation with anyone on council or the mayor or the CAO about bringing this notice of motion forward. So thank you. Second question, we do know already that North Vancouver has already agreed to the B line, which will therefore go from North Vancouver to Park Royal. So really, the first part of the proposal of this motion related to Park Royal and alignments and whatever is a moot point because that's already going to happen. Because we have not decided how it's going to move into West Vancouver yet. It's all going to be delayed by a year. So the B line will happen up to Park Royal starting this fall. And the rest of West Vancouver will be already delayed because the RFP can't be done by TransLink. So really, the first part of your motion is a moot point, isn't it?
Councillor Gambioli, your editorial comments are not germane to the subject matter of the notice of motion.
It's germane to the substance
Well, I don't think
of
so.
your notice of
If you have a
motion,
particular
which is
question-
part one.
If
Councillor
you
Lambert.
have- if you have a
Therefore, be it
particular
resolved
question-
that we work
Can
with
I
TransLink.
have
That's
one
already going to
speak-
happen.
One speaker at a time, and this isn't a court of law. I'm not a judge.
Certainly-
So, okay,
certainly
one
sounds
second,
like
one
it.
second. Yes.
Let me just finish.
Completely moot point. Okay.
I will rule on points of order. Councillor Lambert, if you don't wish to answer the question, please just say that. But as far as points of order, that's my job. So whether it's within the scope of the procedure bylaw or not, I will be asking our clerk if I need assistance, and Councillor Gambioli can ask questions.
So the first part
That's
of your
all of our
point-
roles.
Okay.
So the first part of your point is moot because it's going to happen anyways. For at least a year, there are going to be, the terminus will be at Park Royal. So, all right, it is a moot point then. So you wrote this notice of motion almost a week ago, before most of the public workshops happened, before the large community meeting happened last Thursday with over 700 people. You wrote it 10 days before the online survey is going to close. Don't you think that is showing a lot of disrespect for public input?
I'll address your concerns in my introductory remarks on March the 4th.
What we have said as a council and as staff for the last month and a half to the public is that staff will write a comprehensive report based on all of the feedback that we are currently receiving, which is actually part of the motion, which says a public consultation process has been initiated and council and staff are receiving ongoing feedback from members of the public. So that's what you already wrote. Do you not think that your motion completely undermines what staff and council have set out to do?
I'll address your concerns in my remarks on March the 4th. Thank you, Councillor Gambioli.
Have you already made up your minds?
I'll address your concerns on March the 4th.
I think that's a yes. And finally,
Councillor, can I ask the gallery
finally, it
to be
seems
respectful,
it
please?
seems, according to the Vancouver Sun online this afternoon and evening, that you have already spoken to the media about the results. And do you not think, and the motion that you have made, and it's already online for the public to read. You characterize it as the results are already in. Do you not think that this undermines the public engagement process that we have all agreed to do, and that our own community engagement committee has tasked us to work on?
Again, I'll address your concerns in my remarks on March the 4th.
So I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Those are all my questions for
All right.
today.
Any other questions or items to speak to under the consent agenda list? All right, so can I get a motion to,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move that the consent agenda items as follows be approved. Item 10.1 regarding proposed residential development at 3271 and 3281 Uplands Way, Area 6, Rogers Creek, to be set a date for consideration. Secondly, item 10.2 regarding correspondence list, and item 3 regarding notice of motion regarding proposed TransLink Marine Drive Corridor Beeline project.
all in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you.